You are listening to I Am Refocused podcast with your host, Shemaya Reed. This podcast is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. Now, let's tune into today's podcast.
This is I Am Refocused podcast, and today we have an awesome show lineup for y'all. We have a special guest. Her name is Miss Courtney Harris. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Shemaya. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. And before we get started, just a little quick backdrop on her. She is a life coach for teens and parents. She does a lot of great things for them to get over disconnect, isolation, and she makes everybody grow. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, like you said, I'm a life coach for teens, and all of this started in the classroom. So I've been a classroom teacher for 10 years, and over the course of that time, I really started to recognize that what I loved the most was connecting in small groups, connecting one-on-one with young people. And I really, through hearing their stories over time, realized that teenagers get a bad rap in the world. There's a lot of distrust, or hey, you should be doing more, but when teenagers try to do something on their own, it's like, oh, why'd you do that? You stepped outside of your boundaries. So they have a pretty tough time frame. It's a tough time frame where they're trying to explore what powers they have and where they have agency in their lives. And I don't think that the world is often ready to hold them and affirm them and support them. And so as I was hearing these stories, and as I was really just listening to teenagers, I started to realize that this tough time of life deserves extra support. And I'll add one thing to that is that my teenage years sucked. They were super crappy. I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression. I didn't really have that name for it, though. I didn't know what I was actually experiencing. So social stuff was super tough for me, but I just kind of forced myself to do it because I didn't know what to do otherwise. And so taking into account my own experience and knowing that my parents were struggling during this time for how to support me, and then seeing my students and their struggles, I just realized hey, there's a gap here, and I want to do something about it.
And so you kind of help guide the parents to, as far as they have a son or a daughter who is experiencing this difficulty in their younger age, to how to deal with this. What's some of the first steps that you go through with parents as far as how they deal with their teenager going through this situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I work with parents, so yes, oftentimes I'm working directly with the teenagers, but there's a parent or caregiver component to that. And so what that means is I'm checking in with the parents, and I'm kind of asking, what are you doing for self-care during this time? That's really a foundational piece, is helping parents establish practices and routines for maintaining their own self-care and their own social lives, their own work, whatever elements of life that helps them refuel and refill, let's help them put energy into that. So that's one piece. I also offer meditation/mindfulness practices for parents, because I think that's another way for them to not only take care of themselves, but to be present, because it is true that teenagers may be taking risks and they may be challenging authority, so to speak, and they're trying to test their voice and their power in the world, as I said, and that can be trying and exhausting for parents. So I also do share techniques that help them stay present, stay focused and mindful, and to, let some of that stuff go in a sense. So those are two of the big foundational pieces. But then I also focus a lot on communication strategies. Mm-hmm. So with parents, oftentimes this means talk less and listen more. It's nothing revolutionary, really, or complex, but I find that as adults, we like to give advice. We like to say, oh, I've been there. I've done that. Let me tell you how it went for me. But sometimes teenagers, they just want to be heard. And so listening is another great place to start.
And what are some of the myths that you have discovered with teenagers as you've been taking them in sessions?
Yeah, so the myths that I like to talk about with teenagers and with their families is people are often saying things like, oh, teenagers are so hormonal. But it's really actually, there are hormone changes at the adolescent time of life, but what's really happening, what's actually the bigger game changer for teenagers is what's happening in their brain. And so I always defer to and refer to Dan Siegel. He's a doctor who's done a lot of brain studies. He has a book out called Brainstorm, which is specifically about the teenage brain. So if anyone that's listening works with teenagers or has a teenager, I highly recommend this book, even his YouTube videos. But the point of all of this is, the myth is that it's all about this like raging hormones, but really it's the brain. And so if we can educate teenagers about what's actually happening in their brain and what changes they're going through, they can become more empowered and not just feel like they're being labeled or judged, or pretty much labeled or judged. So, if we can eliminate them, it's kind of like that, whatever we're giving our attention to is what we're going to grow. So if we're always just like, oh, teenagers are so hormonal and crazy, well, then that's what they're going to be. That's what we're going to think. That's what they're going to think of themselves. But if we instead say, wow, this is a really interesting time of development. This is a time when young people are trying to explore themselves, explore what their agency is in the world, how they can affect change in their own life and, their community, then that's the game changer. And that's, the myth that I like to bust with my clients I work with and anyone that gets to hear a little bit about my work.
And does the parent usually come to the teenager ever come to you, and the parent ever been in a situation where they're like, oh, I didn't even know this was happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's interesting because I do have a confidentiality policy so that teenagers know that their work with me is really a safe space for them to create it to be whatever they want it to be. I do, of course, report to parents if there's any harm to self or others, or if the teenager's in danger of being harmed. I do break confidentiality for that. But otherwise, what I'm doing is I'm helping teenagers unearth or discover their own tools for how they think they can get through a tough situation. And then I take out kind of essential bits and pieces of that, and without breaking confidentiality, put it into the package of a communication tool for the parent. So I do always work with both. I hope I'm answering your question correctly as you as you asked it. But yeah, it's an interesting dance for me between the two, because I do like to say this is not a quote drop-off service, in the sense that I do want everyone in the family system, whoever that may be, if there's one parent, two parent, 3, 4, it could be all kinds of, the family could look all kinds of different ways. And I want this to be about the whole family, not just the teenager. I like to have parents and caregivers on board and willing to take a look at their own practices and create new awareness as well.
And checking out your website, CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com, you have a little list of together helping your teen explore, knowing themselves more deeply, being heard, being seen, growing with accountability to self. What's probably the top number one list that you think teens have really gravitated to?
I think they just really want to be seen and heard. Like, the word affirmation is what's coming up for me, that they want to be affirmed that they are good enough, amazing enough, creative enough, whatever enough. They are enough as they are, and not about having to change. And so, in our work together, they will often set goals and they'll be taking action steps to get to those goals. But all the while, what I'm doing, what I'm making sure to give attention to, is to affirm where they are on any given day and on any step that they've taken and however they're showing up. So that affirmation is what I observed really working when I was a classroom teacher is that I wasn't trying to, quote, fix anything. I was just really trying to listen and be there. And that's what has informed my work as a coach. So, yeah, they just want to be seen and heard and know that they are enough as they are.
If you just now joined us, we are talking to Courtney Harris, and she is a coach for teenagers and parents. We are in school season, and what's some of the signs that parents can watch out for? This is something that, they're taking interest in listening to this podcast. What's some warning signs, typical warning signs that they can watch out for their kids who might be experiencing this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would definitely say that any shift that seems like it makes you kind of think, what's going on? So if there's a big change in eating habits, sleeping habits, if I know some parents, I'm not going to go into what I think is right or wrong about this, but if some parents are checking up on how much their teens are using devices or cell phones, if there's a big spike that suddenly they're up on their device all night and you're seeing that through calls or text messages. If there's attendance changes, big grade changes, anything that is doing a roller coaster, really low or really high even could be something we may consider high or low. It's something to explore. And it's not about looking at behaviors under a microscope, but it's more like, okay, I'm just aware, I'm noticing. And when those changes happen, approaching it through not an accusation, but a question. So something like, hey, I noticed that you're sleeping more. What's up with that? And so trying to make it like as low pressure for the teenager as possible. That's a really good way to get started, unless of course it's something that you really are more afraid of their health and safety and you think you need to reach out to a professional or a therapist right away, then trust yourself and do that.
Well, once again, we are talking to Ms. Courtney Harris, a life coach for teens and parents, and it's about that time for our break. When we come back, we're going to dive into some more questions with Ms. Courtney. And don't touch that smartphone. We are on iHeartradio and multiple platforms. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Rockafellas Barbershop. This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will be blessed and be glad in Him. Today I want to introduce myself. My name is Rico Rodriguez at Rockafellas Barbershop here in San Antonio, Texas, 1733 Babcock Road. My phone number is 210-782-5188. And again, we do walk-ins on Sundays. You are listening to I Am Refocused podcast on iHeartradio. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Does your website need more traffic? Well, visit overflowcafe.com today. They make websites popular, and over 41,000 people use their service to gain more customers. They are winning our business. What about you? Visit overflowcafe.com today.
Hey, welcome back. You are listening to I Am Refocused podcast. Make sure you go to refocusmagazine.com to check out all the stories, because we also have a Life Coach magazine that is pretty much the core of this podcast movement, I Am Refocused. You can catch us everywhere: iTunes, Spotify, iHeartradio, TuneinRadio, and I'm not going to say the whole list because it's just too long. I just want to welcome back our guest listening to Ms. Courtney Harris. She is a life coach for teenagers and parents, and I want to start this next half of the show with this question. What is the most common challenges that you have faced with clients who have been using your service?
Yeah, so this has been a really interesting journey to just observe and notice what kinds of clients I end up working with and what parents and teenagers reach out to me. One thing that I'm seeing a lot of is teenagers that identify as introverts, and they're trying to figure out what their social needs are and how to socialize in a way that feels good to them, because Of course, school is often focusing on a lot of group work. There's social media that helps inform, well, I should say, shape what teenagers think social lives need to look like or should look like. And so teenagers that identify as being introverts, and I actually myself identify as being an introvert, might have a hard time navigating what they want their life to look like. So we really dig into that, and they can find ways to socialize that are true to their heart, and where they can kind of learn that it's not all about how it looks on social media. I do also work with, a lot of times parents reach out to me because they're feeling isolated from their teenager. You know, maybe they're doing a lot of the tips and tools that I share through my blog and my writing. Maybe they're asking a lot of open-ended questions. They're showing up to offer support, but they're getting shoulder shrugs or really no answers. And so that's another situation that I get to work with often. And then the third one I'd say that's kind of a top challenge is any kind of transition, say from middle school to high school, or even high school into college, or even an emerging adult they're not going to college and they're trying to figure out what their job path is or their career path is. You know, any of these transitions through this adolescent and young adult time, that's another area that I focus on quite a lot.
And that's a very interesting topic to kind of dig deeper into. The older teenagers who are, you know, thinking about college or thinking about some kind of career, what's some of the similar patterns that you see with the older teenagers who are talking to you?
Yeah, that's really an interesting time of life. I've enjoyed working with the older teens into the 20s lately because I'm noticing that they've gone through a lot of their first round of experimenting in the world and trying to figure out, like, who am I socially? Who do I like to spend time with? And they've got it pared down a little bit more. And so they tend to be more into the, I guess, personal development world, right, of doing this intentional self-exploration. And oftentimes they've already set goals, but they're having a hard time reaching those goals, or they're setting goals and they're failing, but they don't know why. There's some sort of blocks they're facing. So it's really interesting because that age group tends to have a path kind of that they're looking at, but there's some sort of roadblock. Whereas maybe with the younger teens, the path may not be as clear. So that's, you know, the work is similar, but what they're kind of coming to me with or what they're saying their needs are does vary and does tend to be a bit more focused with the older teens.
And speaking of them going through this process and getting your service one-on-one or online, what is the next step if a parent finds your website, CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com? What is the next step? Because they also get to have a specific, unique experience with you. It's not like you just give them a sheet of paper and here's A, B, C, and D and good luck.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so whenever a parent reaches out to me, or if it's, you know, a young adult reaching out to me, we have I always offer a gift of a complimentary discovery call, and this is usually 30 to 45 minutes where we talk about, okay, where is your teenager right now? Or for a young adult, where are you right now? And then where do you want to go? So we look at the current situation, we look at the future, talk about what are some of the things that seem to be getting in the way, what are some of the things that are already working, and we just kind of like take a snapshot of everything that's in front of them regarding their teenager, regarding as a young adult, where they are in their lives. And from there, if it's a parent of a teen, I then move into a meet and greet session with the teenager because this is so important. I do not want parents paying for a program and getting their teenager signed up when the teenager doesn't want to do it. So I value the teenager's voice, and so I do invite them to give the meet and greet a try. And if they feel open to the meet and greet, they feel open to us connecting over a call or meeting up locally here in Austin, Texas, then great, we'll move forward. And after that session, they get to choose, do they want to begin working with me? And so there's a lot of kind of like, there's multiple steps to getting started and setting the intention to working together a bit more long term. And, you know, like I've kind of alluded to, if I'm working directly with the teenager or the young adult, I do wrap in the support for the parents via quick phone calls and check-ins and email support, and they are always welcome to be checking in with me. But I do have the weekly sessions with the teenager or young adult themselves.
And speaking of weekly sessions, you also have workshops that are included with this process. Mm-hmm. Explain to the audience, what can they expect in these workshops?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. So I actually have one coming up next month here in Austin. It's called Friendship from the Heart, and it's actually going to be a party because it's being sponsored by a local party decor team, and so we're going to have all this customized fun stuff. But the workshops are typically experiential. These are not anything like a lecture. No, I don't do lectures. These are sitting in a circle. I ask important questions, high-level critical thinking questions that allow teenagers to really dig into self-reflection and also, again, explore that power of their voice, putting a name to what they've experienced or to their memories or to the sensations they're feeling. And so these workshops involve a lot of, there will be journaling time, there's a restorative circle. So if anyone's familiar with restorative circles, another way I talk about them is just talking circles. Everyone has a choice to share. We use a talking piece, but there's also the opportunity to remain quiet if you don't feel like sharing. And so in these workshops, I'm striving for creating a container for the group to build community together, to co-create community as they're going through their own journeys. So it's a special place, and I really love to facilitate workshops. I primarily do them locally. I am open to traveling for workshops, and I also have done some online workshops, but those have been primarily for parents.
And speaking of workshops and building those systems, you also have a blog that parents can log into. And there was one I saw considering as far as building support systems, and it's a kind of like a list where you're building your systems as far as support groups, places, environments, friends. To teach us a little bit, listeners, what are some of the support systems that you try to instill in these families and these young kids?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you found that. And I do love to help families sit down and work through the process of figuring out what their support systems are. So that can be one another, that can be professionals, it can be things from environmental factors of, some people get more stressed if it's a louder environment. Other people don't like it to be too quiet. So actually just talking about this stuff, the nitty-gritty details about what each family member needs and what helps them to not just, make it through life, but to feel really supported and feel really good about the ways that their life can build them up and boost them up. And so this particular blog, I do have one that's about for teenagers to build their support systems. And actually the one that goes live tomorrow is a bit more focused on adults and support systems. So I'm excited that you asked about that. And it's just something that I feel like we don't talk about enough. We don't talk about the fact that we all need more help than we ask for. And one of my goals through the work that I do is to normalize asking for help so that we can really end the stigmas behind things like mental illness, behind social anxiety, behind feeling like and being an introvert, and so that we can really truly see one another.
And it's fitting to say the first thing a visitor will see when they go CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com is bring peace and ease into your family life. I mean, that's pretty clear. That's pretty clear right there. Now, before we wrap this show up, what's one thing that you would like to get out there for parents who maybe be hesitant to worry about bringing their teen to get some life coaching? Because, some people are in denial and they're like, oh, they'll grow up and they'll get over it.
Yeah, that's a super good question. One way that I describe life coaching is I say, depends on what kind of sports or activities the families are in, but especially when the Olympics were happening or the World Cup, I'm like, okay, were you watching the World Cup? were those the greatest players in all of soccer that we just witnessed? And then, of course, the answer is yes, yes. And then, do they have a coach? Yes. And so I basically described that we all need supports at different times in our lives, and Olympic athletes, they never grow to be so good that they don't need a coach, because there's always room to be supported. There's always room to keep growing, and not in the sense of like we have to literally be a world-class athlete. It just means that we have to have support to keep going and keep growing. And so I like to describe that to parents and know that it's not a bad thing to need support. It's really just a human process, that we're here in community, right? Humans are not meant to live in isolation. We need one another, and coaching is just one level of support that a family can explore, particularly during the interesting and often challenging teen years.
Now, there's one last thing I saw on the website. It's really perfect wrapping up the show. The power of partnership. Coaching will bring you and your family peace, ease, and support during the often challenging teen years and beyond. That's a great starting point, because if they don't start when they're teens, it's going to be hard to start later.
Well said. Yeah, it's never too early to start self-awareness and communication. So that's for sure.
Well, any last statements you want to give, or any shout-outs you would like to give?
Well, I would just say, this work is, it's individualized. It's always taking the form that it needs to take with different clients, and I'm doing my own personal journey in that. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is community, and I'm passionate about crucial conversations, or, these necessary conversations that we need to have. So if you begin following me, you'll notice that I am active in talking about things like race and class and equality and equity. And, that's a part of all of the systems that we're a part of, whether it be neighborhood or schools or governments, right? And so I just like to say that I'm always open to that conversation. I'm open to that conversation with my clients and my colleagues. So anyone that's listening that is interested in growing together and doing better, let's just keep being in dialogue. And that's what I model, that's what I live, and that's what I invite families to do. So I'm grateful to be here and getting to share with your community, Shemaya. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And if you all want to get connected with her today, you can go visit CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com. And also you have Instagram.
Yes, I love the Instagram, all over Instagram. So I'd love to meet up with anyone there.
So before we let you go, I want to say thanks for what you do for the community and what you do for the young people and the parents, because sometimes parents, they just need that extra push, that extra set of hands and that extra set of ears to kind of figure out, what's the next step to reconnect. Truly. So yes, well, thank you for helping me broaden the audience and get to share some support and conversation today. Yes, ma'am. Once again, you all can go to CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com if you need to get your teen involved, or you need to both get involved and have a sit down with Miss Courtney Harris. I suggest you visit CourtneyHarrisCoaching.com. We'll appreciate you being on the show and taking time out of your busy schedule, because I know you have some more sessions that you're going to be getting ready for, and I wish the best for you and your program. Oh, thanks so much, Shemaya, and thanks everyone for listening. Well, we never want to close this broadcast like we do every single week. We want to say keep God first, stay focused, and peace.